Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of INSSA Insights. We've been gone for a while, but are back now with a great show. Today, focused on women in the NGO security sector. Here to discuss the topic are three incredible women, all distinguished leaders in the field. I'm thrilled to welcome Melanie Murphy, Physical Security Director for Human Rights Watch, Lisa Oliveri, Director of Global Risk Management, Security, and Operations for the National Democratic Institute, and Javeria Malik, Global Safety and Security Lead at ActionAid, and also INSSA's Chair. So with that, welcome, ladies. Thank you for joining us. I will go ahead and ask my first question to Melanie, and that is, how did you get started in the NGO security management?
So, I was working as a project manager in rank in what was Southern Sudan at the time, and it was a Saturday morning. And I was still asleep, and I was woken up to gunshots right outside of the house where we lived. And at that point, I was working for a really small and scrappy NGO, which I love. That's where my heart is. But they didn't have any security infrastructure at all or any security training for their staff. And so I remembered running into our living room with my other colleagues who I lived with. And we just decided we would lie on the ground with our couch cushions on our heads and hope that that was the right thing to do. And as I laid there, I was thinking, this is so irresponsible and ridiculous. And I'm only surviving this because of luck right now. And right after that, I realized if I want to get through this contract, I need to step up and learn how to get in place the right protocols, policies, procedures, and training for our staff. And that kind of turned into a part-time job for me in many of my country office roles moving forward. And then when I looked into moving back to Canada where I was based, there was a full-time role with CISO International as a health and safety advisor. And that was back in, I guess, 10 years ago exactly. So it's been great. I can't imagine doing anything else at this point.
Lisa, how about you?
Thanks, Omri. Oh, Melanie, that is quite a story. A hard act to follow, but I had also, I think, a non-traditional start to this particular career. I actually have a background in science and education and international affairs, and earlier on when I was in college and then in grad school, I took on roles as a resident director and a resident assistant at two different universities. And so those positions actually required on-call on nights and weekends, and I had to get training and things like responding to and documenting incidents, mediation and coordination with campus police for emergencies. And so I really enjoyed those experiences, and I think that they provided a foundation for skills that ended up being transferable to other positions. And once I realized that I was interested in a career in the NGO sector, I had the opportunity to build out an NGO's first security program in its 100-year history, and that was a really transformative experience and sort of just piqued my interest and got to understand a little bit more about the complexities with NGO security, and so that's how I got my start.
That's great. Jav, how about you?
So yeah, very interesting hearing from colleagues, because I think what I'm actually learning, listening to colleagues, is that none of us actually probably thought about coming into security, and it was like a real unexpected surprise or turn of events, or a necessity, a need that we thought we should, and we also believed that we could fill. And it was the same for me as well. I started my career as a journalist, as a communications person, basically, and that still continues to be my first love, media, communications, and all that. But then when I was working with an NGO as their communications person, and I used to travel to all these different places collecting stories and testimonies and, documenting case studies, I really needed some sort of security advice before I traveled, and I needed some sort of, security backup, contingency planning, or incident response mechanism if something went wrong for me and my crew. So I started to put those things together. Once I had everything together, I pitched it to the country team, and I said, well, I think that should be for everybody, not just for me. That was well received. And then similarly, I think like Melanie said, I saw that there was a space, and there was actually like a vacuum, a gap at the international level as well. So I jumped at it, and I put myself out there. Actually, it was me that just reached out and said, look, I think you people need to do something about security. And because I've done it so well in one country, give me a chance. Maybe I can replicate it. That was in 2011, and I haven't looked back. I mean, every day has been so busy. And when I tell people it's been, 11 years? Seriously, I don't feel it. It's still a learning experience every day. And I guess it's the same for my colleagues, Melanie and Lisa, as well.
Yeah, absolutely. This field has been very generally heavily dominated by former military and specifically and generally men have predominantly been in the positions of security managers and things like that. What are some of the challenges you face being women in the field of NGO security? And I'll start with you on this one.
Challenge. Look, Amri, to be very honest, I come from Pakistan. No matter what I do, I'd face challenges. So it's very difficult for me to pinpoint as to what difficulties or challenges I faced working in security. I think what worked in my favor was I was so ready for it. I just knew it wasn't going to be easy. Nothing was going to be easy. If I stepped out of the house, it wasn't going to be easy. So I was prepared for it and I was ready for the fight. So I think that helped me. The other thing, I was a bit naive as well because, we're talking 10, 11 years ago. One learns with age and experiences. And at that time, I wasn't even sure. Like when somebody would try to talk me down or, dismiss my great ideas, I would actually take it very objectively. And I would say that naivety helps me because otherwise I think I might have been, as a human being, I might have been discouraged at some point, but I didn't even notice, to be honest.
That's great. Lisa, how about you?
Well, Jav definitely brings up some good points. And Omri, to your point about the representation piece of who is working in this sector or in the industry being predominantly male, I think that continues to be a challenge. I think we can talk more about this later. I think the NGO sector has embraced and created more opportunities for women in security, but other sectors in our industry still have a ways to go. I think that in my experience and conversations with other women in security, we've seen that there are more often challenges or questions about our capabilities. We have to work harder to prove ourselves, or even at times incorporate male counterparts or colleagues to help support or restate advice or guidance that we've already provided. And I also think that there has, in my experience, I've seen more women talk about higher rates of imposter syndrome. So I think that is also something that permeates, women in security for not just our sector, but other sectors.
I'd narrow it down to two. I think that because I don't fit that traditional mold, there is sometimes an assumption on the part of others that I'm not capable or competent enough to do my job. And I'll give you an example. A while back, I was in an interview and someone on the panel told me that they didn't think I was tough enough to do the job well and to survive in the organization. And I can be tough, although I prefer the word assertive when I need to be, but that's not what I want to lead with. I would much rather see that people, or have people see that I am approachable and want to help and work alongside of them. I think especially because so much about security management right now is about really intimate personal details and conversations with people about their fears, about their vulnerabilities, about identity factors that prevent both opportunities and vulnerabilities to them. And I've seen that people are willing to have those with people that they don't trust and find approachable. So I think that assumption is one challenge that I have faced and continue to face. I don't know if it's because I'm a woman or just because of my approach and my work. And I would say the other thing that's just more of a frustration of mine is I tend to get my job explained to me by, it's always men. I've never had a woman try to explain my job to me. It's rarely been by other security colleagues, though. It tends to be by colleagues without a technical security background. That's just, I don't have a lot of time for that.
Well, we've talked about some of the challenges that you guys have faced. What about some of the advantages, and both that you've seen as being a woman, but for women in general in the field? Let's start off with Lisa on this one.
Thanks, Omri. I think Melanie touched upon some of it about how I think we're in a position to create unique levels of trust in our discussions. I think we bring different levels of relatability, different approaches. We have different experiences and innovations that have positively impacted the sector. And I also would just note that I think our willingness to share and support one another has been really refreshing for me. Over the years, I really love our NGO security community. I think we have amazing women and other allies that really support and just make sure that we're, diversifying our thought and approaches as much as possible and being accepting as possible.
Melanie, how about you?
I think, the thing that I hear the most from my women colleagues is that they feel like their needs haven't always been met in past security setups with their organizations. And so I think it just gives me an opportunity to connect with a group that hasn't felt like their needs have been adequately addressed. I would highlight particularly in the area of sexual violence. I also think that an opportunity is being an example for others. So I've had a few women after they've been on a course that I've led on or joined their organizations where they've come to me and said, I didn't realize that this could be an area that I could get into as a woman because I just haven't seen it before. And I love those conversations because it opens up mentoring opportunities, and two of them have actually completely switched their career choice and moved into security because when you see someone like you in a position that you're interested in when you've never seen that before, it just makes that much more possible as an achievement for you to attain.
And Jav, how about you? What are some of the advantages of being a woman in the NGO security sector that you see?
Several, and I really, yes, I concur with what my colleagues have said here, especially what Melanie said about, having a sense of purpose just beyond the work, but rather knowing and intentionally being someone that other people might be able to look up to, or even at least take some sort of inspiration from, even to the extent of saying, well, if she can do it, then so can I. That's fine too. But yes, that is my message. It's not rocket science. Seriously, if I can do it, any woman can. And if they're interested, they must. So being the trailblazer, yes, doing something different, doing something new, finding, my own path, that has been, and the freedom to choose my own path was also a benefit because I was a woman and there weren't many when I joined. So I was given that, I found that opportunity basically. I mean, people actually listened. Maybe it was just my organization, because, every organization would vary in terms of their culture and their leadership style. So, for example, in ActionAid, we are proponents and we are practitioners of feminist leadership style. So, me being a woman or having a feminist leadership style actually gelled in so well. The other thing, again, to the colleagues' points, being a woman and being a person of color, coming from, having a specific nationality, which is not the mainstream nationality, I feel that people feel more connected, especially the 80% of staff that we work with, because they feel, and I get a feeling like they assume what they feel, which is great, and they feel more confident telling me about, their experiences, or even sometimes referring to our shared experiences. So I think that helps. And then I think auxiliary benefits are communication. I wouldn't generalize all women, but at least for me, I feel I have a different communication style to many of my male managers, for example, or many of the male security practitioners and security managers in the sector. It's more personal, it's more empathetic, So again, like I don't want to obviously generalize, because there are so many different types of women, and we can't assume that everybody would have the same style. But I can just speak for me, basically. And probably the last benefit has been, I have noticed, and again, could be just my personal experience, that in official serious conversations and negotiations, for example, when we're negotiating access, or when we're negotiating with tribal leaders, even religious leaders, me being a woman, I'm able to make more inroads because I don't appear to be a threat. I don't challenge their authority, whether I do or not, but they don't take it that way, right? Because it may be their own patriarchal setup where they feel a woman is probably harmless, which works in my favor. So yes, we've been able to negotiate our way through various tensions, which I believe if there was a man having those conversations, it might have turned south. It might have, gone the other way. So yeah, some of the benefits that I can think off the top of my head.
That's great.
Good question, though, Omri.
What and then, well, as a follow up to that, you guys have been in the field now for a few years now. Some of you, like at least 10 in instances. How have things changed from when you started as a woman in this sector to the present day? And I'll leave that up to Melanie. Go ahead.
So I went to my first security coordination meeting back in 2008 or 2009 in Khartoum. And when I walked in the door, they told me that the UNICEF meeting was down the hall. So, just the fact that I was the only woman in there and the assumptions that were made that I didn't belong there, that's completely changed in my experience. Now, most fora that I'm part of, most network, most meetings that I go to within the NGO sector, there's, equal numbers of women and men, if not more women. My team at HRW is actually 3 women at the moment. And I'm worried that we're not now meeting the needs of men or gender diverse people who work for us. So, I think the conversation now is starting to move past and needs to move past this idea of bringing women into the sector and be focused a little bit more on how do we build our security teams to reflect the diversity of our global staff.
That's great. Jav, how about you? How have things changed from when you started to now?
I really like what Melanie said, and I completely agree with that. I guess, yes, just like Melanie, I also noticed a lot of women. It's no more, that unique field where you see mostly, men and, where if you're a woman, you think twice, at least at the international level. It has really improved. So at the country level, still I see that most of the security people are also, because there are human resources, and then if you do a data analysis, most of the human resources managers are women, so hence you see them in security coordination meetings too. So I haven't really, done that kind of a detailed data analysis or data gathering as to how the situation might have improved at the country level, but internationally it certainly has. But here, I just want to, share an observation, but I think my other colleagues can please also reflect on. Now, I like what Melanie said in the beginning, that I think we need to move past or maybe go beyond and even make further improvements to the gender balance. Because, yes, we have sort of created, this binary, if we look at binary gender, of course, there's now a little bit of balance, but, again, with other diversity, let's start looking at that as well. Instead of, having goals of just women inclusion, how about we talk about true diversity? And I would just refer to the recent article that came out, GISF's blog article. Basically, it's a paper, and there are several blogs that are being written about, nationality, race, ethnicity. So how about bringing that into the conversation as well? Because now this sector is pretty much inclusive of men and women, pretty much, if not ideal. So because now that women are part of it, let's do it differently. Let's lead the diversity, equity, inclusion conversation in a real diversified manner. So let's not just stick to our inclusion, but rather how can we open it up, for everybody else? And how can we make sure that we are representing the voices, our teams are representing the voices and thoughts and risks and solutions for the staff that we serve and for the communities that we work with.
That's great. Lisa, how about you? And I know you're also part of As Is, and so you have a sort of a good view of the broader security industry. How have things changed both in the NGO security sector, but in the broader sort of security industry as a whole since you started?
Thanks, Omri. Yes, I am affiliated with ASIS International, and what I can share with this group today is that I think associations and other organizations have been recognizing the importance of women in security and over the last few years, and I've seen more focus groups. I think, Melanie, you alluded to this, that there are more women in security groups being formed, or they're more commonplace now. And Jav, I was just reflecting on what you were saying about the diversity and the equity and inclusion focus, and I agree with you 100%. I think that more can be done and more attention to that can really be implemented, but those are some really great points. Omri, I think across the board in our sector and other sectors, I've been really heartened by seeing women in more leadership positions and on more boards that were predominantly male. And so, Jav, congrats to you as well for being the chair of INSSA. I think that's a wonderful just example of how over the past few years, maybe that wasn't always the case. Certainly for ASIS, being the first female chair of the CSO Center was something that I thought was a great indicator of just the acceptance and willingness to bring more women into leadership positions. And I'm hoping that we can see more of that as we go forward and keep supporting other women who have those aspirations.
That's great. And you guys all three mentioned this idea of becoming more inclusive within the sector and bringing in more diverse viewpoints. Do you think that the NGO security sector is open to more women in the field, or is it? And Lisa, you touched on this too, or is it reaching sort of a balancing point where it's just sort of it's commonplace now? And I'll throw it over to you, Jeff.
I think so. And to Lisa's point, actually, I do agree that I always, whenever there was a conversation about, including women in the security sector or opening or making it more inviting and more, let's say, workable for women, I always said, I'm only going to be convinced when I see women in leadership position. And I'm speaking not number 2, but the top position. And here we are, which I'm so privileged and I feel so honored to be sharing this virtual space with 2 women that are really leading it. So you see, that's the change that I see today. And we're peers. Previously, there was one woman who'd probably written like 10 books, and she was like one in like 20 men. But now, look at this event today, but also when you go out to different forums, international forums, you do see women leading it. So yes, that's absolutely amazing, and well done to the whole sector. Well done to men also, because I have been supported so wholeheartedly. By the way, Omri is one of them who's been so supportive, and there's so many male colleagues that have just they've just shared their wisdom, their experience, and they've sort of stepped aside to sort of, make way. But the situation is not as rosy at country level. Because you see, at international level, there's so many other, let's call a spade, because at the international level, when we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, then the organizations are also answerable to donors, to stakeholders, to board members. And therefore, sometimes we might be given an opportunity, which we obviously deserve, but we may not have gotten it if these organizations weren't accountable on their EDI agenda, right? Now, at the country level, because it's not a global stage, I sometimes feel, just in my work, that things go unnoticed. And if you're not being very diverse, if you're not being very fair, and if you're not providing equal opportunity, that's still okay, because in the given culture, nobody challenges it. So now I think from the global, us, leaders in the sector, we must now, and I'm sure we're already doing, but we must continue to focus at the national and then local levels and make sure that leadership of women and other genders is also not only promoted, but also respected. Thank you.
Lisa, how about you? Do you see a broader role and a larger role for women in the field as a whole, but also specifically the NGO security sector?
Absolutely. I echo, I don't think there's much else I can add to Jav's response there. I just agree wholeheartedly that there's definitely some work that could be done there. To your original question, Omri, about our NGO sector being more open to women in the field, I think Jav also hit the nail on the head with this, that I was thinking about this. I think we're so fortunate that we had as many allies and men who were willing to really lead and mentor and bring more women into this sector and into this field. So just reflecting on my own experience, I mean, there are opportunities I never would have put my hand up for had I not had multiple allies and, supportive colleagues just saying, hey, you should do this. Because I think there was a lot of, hey, I don't know if I'm qualified for this, or, am I going to be able to do a good job on? And so really having that message and that support repeatedly makes a huge difference. And so I think that is sort of unique to our sector. I don't think as many sectors have had that unanimous sort of support across the board to lift up more women in security. So maybe that's what makes us a little bit unique in this space. I don't know, but definitely would agree with Jav on those points.
Melanie, how about you? Where do you see women playing a role in an expanded role in NGO security management?
So I agree wholeheartedly with Jav's answer built on by Lisa. So I'll continue to build on it. I think this is where the responsibility lies for those of us who have made it to more senior global level roles, is to identify those people who are showing a passion for this kind of work, an ability for this kind of work in roles that they're already in. So when I think of country offices that I've worked in before, HR departments are allies in our duty of care work. And so I have seen and worked with women and kind of like helped to move them more towards orienting their roles towards more security management so that they could take that on and build the experience. I think that people who are in facilities management are already doing security work on their buildings. And so there's that area to shift into. And I also think that people who are doing programming work, I mean, they understand the essence of why we work for these organizations, and who better to be designing security management systems that really enable that kind of work. So, I think the onus is on us to be looking for that potential and passion in people that might want to make that move into it at country office level.
That's great. As leaders in the field, and you guys have touched on this, what advice do you have for women who are thinking about careers in NGO security management or the security sector as a whole? Start off with you, Lisa.
Thanks, Anne-Marie. I would say, for me, from my perspective, I mean, taking advantage of every learning opportunity that is offered to you is such a huge part of, I think, just getting your foot in the door and seeing if this is a career path that you would be interested in and passionate about. Melanie had mentioned a little bit about that, just making opportunities available. And what's great, and I think that even during the pandemic, this has become more prevalent, are the availability of courses and sessions that are free, that there's no cost to them. They're translated into multiple languages. And so anytime there's a complimentary or free training online, then that's always something I try to encourage staff to take advantage of. Also, if just keeping abreast of events that might be going on. I mentioned earlier about volunteering, putting your hand up, getting involved with as many associations or groups that you can, finding a mentor, seeing if eventually certifications is something that you'd want to pursue. Just a plug here that INSSA has some certifications that people may want to learn about if they haven't been aware already. But those are just some high-level things that I think that I've tried to encourage, on my team, and as well as just with people that I've spoken with who have an interest in the security industry.
Melanie, how about you? What kind of advice would you give to women interested in joining this field?
I would say follow Lisa's advice and then figure out how you can start
no cheating. That's cheating.
Yeah. And then I would say figure out how you can start building some of those things into your job. And I do want to make a caveat here, because I think that many women have a tendency to take on things that they're not adequately compensated for. And so, make sure that that's not happening. Have a conversation with your HR teams, with your manager, because this is a technical expertise that needs to be properly compensated and recognized in your job description. But I think the more that you can start to put the things that you're learning in the trainings into action, the more, I've lost the word I'm looking for, but the more appealing you are going to come across to a potential employer. And I'm going to add one thing. I would also say that you probably won't find a more rewarding career to get into. Most of our colleagues are forward-looking, outward-looking, providing services to others, and we get to support our colleagues. And, that's such a great feeling to sign off every day. Okay. It's a bit of an inaccuracy that we sign off every day because we're usually on call throughout the night as well. But it's a great feeling to know that that's what we get to contribute to.
That's great. And Javeria, your advice for women looking to join this field?
Two things. And of course, no, actually three, because my point number one is please follow Lisa and Melanie's advice and you're sorted. But just, I think one point that comes before everything. When women are, or let's say anybody, but since you asked the question about women, what advice we'll give to women, just based on my experience, I would want to let anyone who's interested in this field know that there are certain requirements that are non-negotiable that come with security role. You've just got to be mindful of that. And that is, you can be and definitely will be called to work on weekends, because the security incidents or, crises, they will usually, in my experience, they have happened on weekends or after hours. They never happen when you're all fresh and already working in front of your laptop. But that bit aside, you will be called in late evenings because people depend on you in your technical advice. Your opinion matters. Your professional advice matters. So, and I would say that to women, look, if you're ready for it, only then you need to come in security. Because every different field has a different type of, like a non-negotiable. This is a minimum, number one KPI that you've got to be available. So that's important. And I think the other thing is, please carry your identity, whoever you are, with pride. You don't have to emulate someone who once gave you a security training and was so assertive. Okay, I'm just being kind, but so bossy and, so military-like. You don't have to do that. You are who you are. You are gonna be hired for what you bring to the table, because the world is changing. The world is really changing. So please carry yourself, your identity, all aspects of your identity, with pride. I think that's it. And that, coupled with what my colleagues have said, I think we've got a really nice advice pack.
Shifting gears now to sort of the big picture and sort of away from specifically talking about women in the NGO security sector, but the sector at large as leaders in the field and as people with the pulse on the sort of the security sector. What are some of the biggest challenges that the NGO security sector is facing when it comes to safety and security? And I'll start, Melanie, with you on this one.
I think one is the sometimes conflict between compliance versus culture. I would way rather have a team of staff who walk into a scenario and think really critically about risk and how they respond to it, as opposed to following a 10-point list of guidance that I've given them from behind my desk in Ottawa. So, I want people to embrace security because it enables their work, because it gets them home to their families safely at night, and it promotes the safety and security of those that we are coming into contact with as well, as opposed to, well, you need to follow this because it's written as a rule or a guideline. I think also we're seeing the impact that this kind of work, in seeing so many tragedies, is playing on people's mental health. I think a lot of that is coming from organizational dynamics, actually, more than seeing and working around tragedy. And I think that until we get a hold of that and rein it in and merge our wellness and mental health efforts with security, we're going to continue to see staff putting themselves at unnecessary risk, motivated by a lack of decision-making capability because their mental health is suffering. So I would say that those are the two big things that I see.
Great. Jav, what are your see as the biggest challenges in the NGO sector when it comes to safety and security?
Good, very good question, and gave me a lot to think about in the last 30 seconds. 3 things I'd like to share. External. 1 is external and 2 are internal. So externally, the unpredictability of the context, the global context, is, I think, through the roof. I started like 10, 11 years ago, or counting my country level experience, it's total been 14 years. I've never known context to change this or shift that rapidly. We knew, previously we just knew for whole 1 year, we knew which countries were rated as, high threat locations and moderate threat locations. Now you got to look at it almost on a monthly basis. And then you also got to predict what might be happening in the region because it's very chaotic for security managers right now. And previously we used to kind of focus on countries where we had direct operations. But now it is a global overview. Every global security manager must have a global overview because what's happening so far away from your area of interest will actually impact your area of interest within weeks, right? So that's the unpredictability. Whoops, too much. That's sort of keeping us up at night. The 2 things that are happening internally, budgets. So funding situation is not looking so good, and especially unrestricted funding. So yes, of course, we can tie budgets with different projects, but then it's not very uniform and it's not equitable as well because some projects are favorites and they still get like a lot of generous funding even if they don't need that level of security budgets, but other places, well, because of teams or because of the geographic location, it's not, the priority area, but the need is more. So when you get unrestricted funding for, security, it ties your hands really. So budgets are a huge problem. The third thing, again, the second factor, which is internal, so total third point is NGO jobs generally are becoming more demanding and less rewarding. And I say that because the world economy, people want jobs. Jobs are not easy to find, generally. And because of budget cuts and restructures and all that, where we used to have 5 people, now we have 2 people. So what people are doing, they're working under pressure. And in order to meet deadlines, people are taking risks, even when there are no security measures in place. So I see that happening. It started to happen about 3-4 years ago when it really started to, hit me. But now I see a lot of that happening. And that's something I guess all of us would need to grapple with and find some solutions to. Maybe lower expectations. I don't know.
Lisa, how about you? What are some of the biggest challenges to the NGO sector when it comes to safety and security do you see?
Well, I've been thinking about this as my colleagues were speaking, and so I had another thought I'll share after this, but I just feel compelled to kind of piggyback on what both Jav and Melanie have already started here, and it's so the mental health component that relates to the burnout, that relates to retention, and Jav, what you were saying about, the rewarding piece, and will we start to see really talented people leave because of these restricted funds or the difficulties with budgeting? And so I think resourcing is certainly something to keep an eye on and to keep advocating for. And I know it's a really hard discussion and we all face it, especially as cuts need to be made, but that is definitely a very big issue. And I think another big challenge that I'm seeing globally is that we're seeing more restrictive NGO laws that cut down on access, makes it more difficult to operate in certain environments. We're dealing with the perception that, NGOs are extensions of governments. And Omri, I know you've posted on social media before about, aid workers not being targets and NGO workers not being targets of violence, but we're still seeing many attacks on people working in the sector. So that continues. I think it's been an issue, and I think it will continue to be an issue going forward. And then quickly, just, disinformation campaigns, cybersecurity issues, and I think in the long term for our sector, climate change related issues will be a big factor on many levels, and will definitely change how we operate and travel. So keeping an eye on that as well.
Excellent. Well, I have one final question for you. It's a softball, no. Not security related, but I always like to ask, what's on your summer reading list? So Lisa, start with you. What are you reading this summer? If you even have the time, if any of you have the time to read.
Oh, I was hoping to steal some ideas from Melanie and Jav, but I do have a few ASIS security management magazines that I have to flip through. I will just do a quick shout out for someone who's in our sector. R.C. Miles, who is the Global Director of Safety and Security for the AIDS Healthcare Foundation, actually wrote the cover story that's on the most recent edition. So I'm looking forward to reading that hopefully this weekend. And then I am late to this party, but many people have recommended Left of Bang to me by Patrick Van Horn and Jason Riley. So I'm hoping sometime this summer I can actually sit down and read it. Someone gave it to me ages ago, and I just have to be disciplined in actually getting through it.
Jav, how about you? What's on your reading list?
Wow, that's a good one because I'm definitely going to read my dad's autobiography. So dad's almost completed it. So the author is Colonel Ayaz Malik, and that's his journey from from his birth in a village, how he studied. But it's so interesting. My God, my dad was so naughty as a child. But he was so smart. He enrolled in a school himself when nobody was sending him to a specific school that he wanted to go to because of the high standards. He just went there and made someone his fake dad and stuff like that. It was really funny. So yeah, I'm sure he censored it because he knew that his kids were going to read it. But that's going to be my reading. And of course I'm going to be writing a few articles because I've promised a few people since last year. So I think, that's what I'm going to do.
Excellent. And Melanie, how about you? What's on your summer reading list?
After those answers, I'm embarrassed to share mine, but there is absolutely nothing on my summer reading for pleasure list. I'm one of those people who lost the desire to read for fun during the pandemic, and I've never gotten it back. But also, we have so few months in Canada that have nice weather, so I'm not going to spend it sitting around reading. I'm going to be out biking and kayaking and hiking and enjoying our brief nice weather.
Well, listen, I want to thank all three of you so much, Lisa Oliveri, Javeria Malik, and Melanie Murphy, so much for joining us on INSSA Insights. And hopefully to have you back on at another time to discuss other issues, and hopefully, we'll be able to talk about broader issues that have come up. But thank you again for joining us.
Thank you so much. My
so
special thanks to Lisa and Melanie. Thank you so much, colleagues. I know Omri is the chief of this, but I really want to thank you on behalf of INSSA for making the time and for inspiring us. And I'm sure everybody that will listen to it will be so inspired. Thank you for doing what you do, and stay strong. I think there's a great community that we're all building, are all women security leaders and managers. So let's continue to do that. And Omri, you're a great host. I so enjoyed it. Awesome. Well done.
Thank you to the Robert McPherson Fellowship for its generous support and donation, helping to make these podcasts possible.